Alright, I'm going to go through the city attorney memo that was for the introduction of this new proposed ordinance that has been passed through City Council last week concerning First Amendment protected expression activities and merchandise. Um, so I'm going to go over this file next. Just basically, yeah, just basically going to read everything out, and then I'll give some comments along the way as necessary, or if there's something really off key or that makes me concerned. Um, Anyways, without further ado, I'm going to go and read this report. Office of City Attorney, City of San Diego, Memorandum MS F or MS 59. Date February 8th, 2024. 2. Honorable Mayor and Council Members. From City Attorney. Subject First Amendment protection of expression, merchandise, and performances in public spaces in San Diego. Introduction. First Amendment to the United States Constitution, which applies to the action of states through the 14th Amendment, protects an individual's right to speech and to peacefully assembly. U.S. Constitutional Amendment 1, U.S. Constitutional Amendment X 4, which would be 14. The California Constitution also protects the rights of every person to freely speak his or her sentiments on all subjects, and provides that no law may restrain or abridge liberty of speech or press. California Constitution, Article 1 and 2. On October 5th, 2023, the San Diego City Council Committee on Community and Neighborhood Services Committee considered proposed amendments to the San Diego Municipal Code, SDMC, or Municipal Code, intended to balance the public's First Amendment rights against the City of San Diego's city interest in public safety and access to public facilities, including city parks and sidewalks. Specifically, the committee focused on the sale of merchandise and performance in city parks, on city sidewalks, collectively, parks and regulations, and the sidewalk vending ordinance SVO. San Diego Municipal Code sections 36.0101 36.0116. Both parks regulations and the SVO currently exempt from the SVO any vendor or individual engaged solely in artistic performances, free speech, political, or petitioning activities who is vending items constituting expressive activity protected by the First Amendment, SDMC 36.0113A1. The proposed amendments create a new division of the municipal code that regulates expressive activities by individuals and small groups, including the sale of merchandise and performing occurring on city property, SDMC 36.03 and 3 or 63 sorry, SDMC 63.03 and 63.50. The proposed amendments would clarify which activities by individuals constitute expressive activity and would continue to be exempt from the SVO. Sidewalk. Uh, since the proposed amendments to the SDMC primarily address activities occurring in city parks and sidewalks, this memorandum focuses on a regulation of speech in these traditional public fora and provides guidance in the most common scenarios of regulation of expressive activity in the city. City can regulate expressive activities. Cities can impose reasonable regulations governing time, place, and manner of speech, despite the broad protections afforded by speech guaranteed by the U.S. Constitution and the California Constitutions. These regulations cannot be based on the contents of speech. Berger versus Seattle, Ninth Circuit, 2009. To pass the Constitution scrutiny, the city must adopt reasonable regulations on time, place, and manner of how someone engages in speech activities in traditional public forum that are content neutral, narrowly tailored to serve significant government interests, and leave open ample channels for communication on the information. Again, Berger. Further, the government bears burden of justifying the regulations of expressive activity in public forum. See attachment to this memorandum as attachment A, which has full discussion on these factors. I want to stop right here for a minute and talk about this Berger versus Seattle. There's some language used in the new city code, which I'll get to when I get to that section of these videos. But the language is from Berger versus the city of Seattle, and they're basically saying that they can create designated spaces because of this language. But if you read further down in Berger versus Seattle, which I think I'll go over this case later, near the bottom, the courts agree with the original court statement that none of the five laws or rules that were put in place were legitimate because they all violated Berger's constitutional rights, and that included having designated spaces for buskers. So I find it interesting that they used the language from this case, but didn't even bother to read the whole case to see that that language was shot down. This shows an error in their ability to comprehend the case file that they're looking at, or perhaps they were just glancing over it and found this one thing and just totally missed the rest of the case file. I'm not sure why this error occurred, but it seems like a silly error. Again, I'll go over that case file later on after I finish all this. Certain sales activities are expressive activities and therefore fully protected by speech, subject only to time, place, manner regulation. The chart below describes some common activities occurring in city parks and on city sidewalks, and identifies whether activities are protected by the First Amendment or not, the relevant legal authority. The protected afforded by the First Amendment are nowhere stronger in the streets and parks. Nowhere stronger than in streets and parks. Both are categorized for the First Amendment purposes as a traditional public forum. Berger. The memorandum does not address all regulations applicable to First Amendment activity. For instance, street performer or vendor engaged in fully protected expressive activity under the First Amendment may still be required to obtain a business tax certificate under the municipal code, or other types of certificates and license depending on the activity. So, now we're going to go over this chart that's here. This is a chart that we actually went over in a city meeting with Vivian Morena and Stephen Hill. There was myself and 4 other buskers, all representing different facets of busking, from magicians to art to music, and even plein air artists who just go out and do art in the public to paint what they see, basically. Anyways, so activity. A performer making a balloon sculptures, face painting, performing magic tricks, dancing, performing as a human statue, and other expressive forms of expressive entertainment. Protected speech? Yes. Legal citation? See Berger versus City of Seattle. Santo Papero versus Howe. Performing musician, including the musician who sells their own recordings. Yes, it's protected speech. See the same to legal citations. An individual or group passing out pamphlets, flyers, newspapers, or other written material. This activity may include the sales of related materials furthering the messages being conveyed. Yes. See Graduia Vishna Society versus City and County of San Francisco, 9th Circuit, 1990. An individual who provides henna tattoos, possibly traditional tattoos, which are permanent in nature, are protected speech. The courts have not addressed whether henna tattoo, which is temporary and more like face painting, is protected speech. See City of Hermosa Beach versus Anderson, Berger versus Seattle, Santa Barbara versus Howe. Now, in the actual code, it actually puts henna tattoos as protected. The fact that it says possibly is kind of funny when right below it says like face painting, which is protected. So it should be, yes, this is protected. This shouldn't be a question here. Yet, this has been posed by the city attorney. And this was February 8th, 2024. They drafted this ordinance and released it a week later. So anyways, going back to this. Activity. Now, this activity was previously illegal in the code, and I pushed for them to add this activity because it should be considered protected speech. And the code was from 1933, and it was basically against Romani people. So I pushed to change that because I thought that that code was ridiculous and against our First Amendment rights. Anyways, the activity. An individual who provides fortune telling, tarot card reading, and similar activities. Protected speech. Yes, see Adams versus City of Alexandria. An artist drawing characters or creating other art, including plain art and sidewalk chart. Yes, protected speech. See White versus Sadie Sparks. I am so happy that they added sidewalk chalk to this ordinance. There's so many sidewalk chalk artists out there doing sidewalk chalk that have gotten citations from park rangers. It is just completely ridiculous. So it is beautiful that they included that to this code. That is amazing. It's amazing that they added plein air art to this code. That is, or to this chart of protected activity. That is amazing. If it's attached to the code, even better. An artist selling the artist's original work or own original artwork, including paintings, photographs, and sculptures. Yes, it's protected. See White versus City of Sparks, 9th Circuit, 2007. ETW Corp versus Jerapub Inc., 6th Circuit, 2003. An author or poet selling or giving away the author's or poet's original written work. Yes. See White versus City of Sparks, Circuit, 9th Circuit, 2007. A vendor selling mass-produced jewelry, posters, t-shirts, mugs, or other merchandise, for example, with the name of a university or city with or images or symbols. No, not protected. See Winter versus DC Comics, White versus City of Sparks. A vendor selling articles of clothing, whether bearing a message or not. No, unless the item is sold is inextricably entwined with a political, religious, ideological, or other messages. See Goja Vishna Society, City of County of San Francisco, Winter versus DC Comics, Cohen versus California. This other messages was defined to me in the meeting that we had with city leaders, Vivian Marina and Stephen Hill, or city staff, that other messages would be artistic messages, artistic creativity. So if I make a piece of art and then take that art and put it on some clothing, that clothing would be protected sales. It'd be First Amendment protected sales. Now, in the code, it doesn't define this at all, and this other messages is really kind of vague and left to the discretion of the park rangers or the police officers. And that might get at least this one part shot down in the code. Okay, we're going to move on. A vendor selling soaps, oils, creams, salves, ointments, lotions, makeup, and other skincare products, whether mass-produced or homemade. No, not protected speech. See Hunt versus City of LA, 2011. A vendor selling tie-dyed t-shirts made by the vendor or hats with images or patches added by the vendor. No, unless the item is sold is inextricably intertwined with political, religious, ideological, or other messages. There's that other messages again. That would make this vague. I know that they said it was supposed to be towards art, but the word other is extremely vague and, again, left to the discretion of law enforcement. It says see Cohen versus California, Winter versus DC Comics, Gudja Vishnu Society versus City and County of San Francisco, and White versus City of Sparks. A vendor selling incense, sage, smudges, and other related items. No. See Hunt versus City of LA. I really think sage and incense and anything that is a religious or spiritual item would be protected. I think they're going to have a hard time with this one. Hunt versus LA is also about a a salve or an ointment that Hunt was selling, not incense. So I don't see how that is applicable to this situation. A vendor selling jewelry, pottery, or metalwork that the vendor made themselves. No. Well, they told us in the meeting that this would be protected if it was local mom and pop artists. The mayor said that this would be protected if it was local mom and pop artists. But right here in this chart, it says no. They promised that they would look into this and change this. Yet right here, it says no. And it says C. Cohen versus California and Winter versus DC Comics. Both of these are pretty old codes, and I bet you there's something newer when it comes to at least pottery, metalwork, and jewelry if they make it themselves. An instructor teaching exercise, yoga, dog training classes. No. I think yoga falls under religious. I think maybe exercise might fall under philosophical. So I'm not sure how this would apply, and both of these codes are pretty old, or case files. 1989 and 2002. City of Dallas versus Strangland in 89, and Daly versus Harris in 2002. Commercial speech can be regulated to a greater degree than expressive activity without a solely commercial purpose. Commercial speech is not fully protected under the First Amendment and can be regulated. See Hunt versus City of Los Angeles. That'd be Ninth Circuit 2011, quoting United States versus United Foods, Inc., U.S. 505, Central Hudson Gas and Electric Public Service. Column of New York. An example of commercial speech would be the promotion of products such as through a print advertisement or a television commercial. Most sidewalk vendors are likely to be engaged in commercial sales, which involves speech that does more than propose commercial transaction, and thus does not receive full protection under the First Amendment. Where commercial speech is an issue, the time, place, or manner analysis of regulations on that speech do not apply. Hunt. Rather, the Central Hudson test is used to analyze the restrictions on commercial speech. Under the Central Hudson test, courts will determine whether the speech concerns a lawful activity and is not misleading, whether the assertive government interest regulating the speech is substantial, whether regulation directly advances the government interest asserted, and whether the regulation is more extensive than necessary to serve the interest. Central Hudson 447 U.S. at 564. See also Hunt versus City of Los Angeles. Discussing the Central Hudson standard with respect to the corporate sponsorship regulations. In short, the city may adopt more restrictive regulations on commercial speech than fully protective expressive activity. Expressive items like artwork, newspapers, music, recordings that are sold rather than given away are protected by the First Amendment. First Amendment protections of speech is not diminished because an item sold rather than given away or because donation is requested. White. Further speech that solicits funds from protected by First Amendment. Berger. Since solicitations of donations is protected speech, regulations on solicitations are subject to the same scrutiny other forms of protected speech. The city may adopt reasonable time, place, manner regulations on solicitations activities to address legitimate government concern. In San Diego, the city already regulates solicitations that is coupled with aggressive behavior. However, solicitation itself is not banned. The city can regulate speakers by using designated areas for expressive speech. In Berger, the court assessed whether the Seattle Civic Center performance location rule, whether placed in performer's 16 designated locations, expressive speech constitutes reasonable time, manner, speech. Although Berger Court did not have sufficient evidence compelling performer to assess the constitutionality of the performance location rule, the Berger Court approved the city of Seattle's stated government interest in addressing territorial disputes, buskers, and providing safe access of passive travel. The court also determined the rule did not prevent performers from reaching their intended audiences when performing. Actually, I can go to where I'm just going to go and pull this Berger versus Seattle up because there is a portion of this. Um, so somewhere in this, I'm gonna have to just. I guess I'll have to reread this later, but I have the Berger versus Seattle report here, and there's one point where the court says that all 5 of the rules and regulations were stricken down because they violated his constitutional rights. I'm not sure exactly where that is in this report. I'll have to, like I said, do a report on that later. But basically, they erred in this because this is in the middle of that case, whereas at the end of the case, they agreed with the original dissertation of the judge that stated that all 5 were against his constitutional rights, including the designated areas. So this is an error, and this location rule is applied badly in this ordinance. So let's go further down the ordinance. In addition to the interest discussed in Berger, the city has an interest in balancing the use of public spaces and limiting confusion among the individuals exercising their free speech rights while ensuring the highest level of public safety throughout the city. The city may legally adopt expressive activity locations in the parks and high traffic areas where city staff determined are significant concerns about competing uses and safe access to travel within those areas. When adopting expressive activity locations, the city must ensure sufficient locations are created to allow speakers and performers to have reasonable access to their intended audiences. The city may also ask speakers and performers to comply with other generally applicable laws, including those prohibiting people from blocking pedestrian and vehicular paths of travel. If a speaker or performer attracts a crowd, enforcement officials may ask the speaker or performer to move to another area where the crowd will not block the flow of traffic, or may ask the speaker or performer to request the audience to be aware of their surroundings and not block the flow of traffic. Some of this is reasonable, but again, it seems like they didn't read all of Berger versus Seattle because it struck down creating designated zones in traditional public forum. The whole purpose of traditional public forum is that it is the designated zone for expressive and First Amendment activities. They even state that at the beginning of this city attorney memo when they say that the public forum is no better place for it than parks and sidewalks. So what they're saying here is kind of ridiculous, and it contradicts their own language at the beginning of this memorandum. So, city cannot ban amplification. Although a complete ban on amplification in city parks and sidewalks is unlikely to survive a legal challenge, the city can adopt reasonable regulations limiting the use of amplification or the hours of use in areas where it can demonstrate a significant public interest in regulating the use of amplification. For example, near residences where a municipality's interest in protecting its citizens from unwelcome noise is at its zenith. In Cordella, the court recognized the city of Vallejo's significant interest in protecting its citizens from unwelcome noise and from unsafe traffic conditions. because of the noise. Cavello 944F3 at 828. However, the court found that Vallejo's permit requirement was not sufficiently narrowly tailored because it applied the same noise level restriction to high noise level locations, like in front of a noisy theme park, and a low noise locations where people go to seek peace and solitude. Based on Cavello's holding, the city may adopt reasonable decibel restrictions in areas close to residences and other locations where the city has significant interest in protecting citizens from unwelcome or excessive noise. Any regulations should be drafted to only apply to locations where noise is a concern. For example, the decibel restrictions could be more restrictive in areas that are close to residences, and high decibel levels could be adopted for high traffic areas of the parks and boardwalks during daytime hours where higher noise levels are expected. The city can regulate the use of tables, easels, and other equipment to facilitate the dissemination of expressive messages if its regulations are reasonable and designated to address significant city interests. ACLU of Nevada versus City of Las Vegas. Ninth Circuit 2006. In ACLU of Nevada, the court considered whether the City of Las Vegas ordinance banning the use of tables was constitutional time, place, manner restricted on speech. The court stated that the use of tables on public sidewalks should be protected if it facilitates a dissemination of its message by, for example, serving as a place to display T-shirts bearing a message. ACLU Nevada said, however, this cannot be said the same with the use of chairs, umbrellas, and boxes, since those items do not facilitate the dissemination of a message, but provide a comfort and convenience to the vendor. The city can adopt reasonable regulations related to an individual speaker's use of equipment, addressing significant government interests, ensuring safe access paths of travel in those city parks with high volume of visitors and narrow walkways. One method to regulate the use of equipment in those situations could require individuals who use equipment to limit their expressive activities to establish expressive activity areas to ensure the speakers are not blocking walkways, accessible routes, safety paths. Additionally, city may adopt reasonable equipment size requirements of those using them to support their speech. Conclusion. The proposed amendments to San Diego Municipal Code are intended to provide city staff and the public with guidance regarding the First Amendment and pertains to the sale of merchandise, speeches, and performance under the SVO and under the Municipal Code in the public spaces. This office is ready to assist as needed. Mara W. Elliott, City Attorney. Catherine C. Morrison, Deputy City Attorney. And then they go into First Amendment issues related to fitness and yoga classes, and this is by Parks and Recs and Beaches. None of this actually applies to us, or to buskers and artists, so I'm not really going to go over all this. This is a lot to go over. It's posted in the files page if you want to go over it. It's called City Attorney Memo, MS 2024. Here, I'll pull up the whole title. MS 2024-1 City Attorney Memo Expressive Activities. You can find this in the San Diego Buskers page under Files. Alright, I'm going to end this discussion on the City Attorney Memo and start the next discussion on the ordinance strikeout. And then I think I'm going to end this all with going over the conclusion and the details of Berger versus City of Seattle. I'm not going to go over the whole case. It's a lot to go over. Just going to go over the conclusion and what the judge basically decided, because that's what's most important and what set the legal precedence. All right, I'll be back with the next soon.